topic again for this week. Hi, everybody. It's Aqua here from Hand in Hand Community, CIC. We are here on our third Families Grow Together show, and we are continuing with the topic of communication. Last week, we looked at what communication was. We looked at the different types of communication. We looked at the importance of communication. We looked at some barriers to communication, as well as we looked at how to communicate effectively. So today, our very own Nelly is going to talk about communication with oneself. Hi, Nelly. Welcome.
Hi, Aqua. Thank you for today. Just to say sorry to the listeners, we had some technical difficulties. So I am Nelly Kwasumi, and welcome to another session on communication. Today, we'll be talking about communication with oneself. So let me just share my screen so we'll go through this together. So while my screen is loading, okay, so today is communication with oneself. What we'll cover today is what actually is communication with oneself, the importance, the myths, and tips on improving self-communication. So, what is communication with oneself? This is the act of talking to you and you alone. Some people say you are talking to yourself. Self-communication, they say so many self things, or intrapersonal communication. This is sending and receiving messages within one's mind. So if you remember, we said from the last session or from the last show that communication involves two people, the sender and the receiver. But in this case, a person like you and me, we are the senders as well as the receivers. So I'm sure you start thinking how that can get complicated, but actually that is what happens. This communication or the message can be cheerful and supportive, or again, it could be negative and self-destroying. For example, you can say things like, I'm not good at all. Or you can say, I can do this no matter what. All of those are common messages that we tell ourselves. Again, we are the senders as well as the receivers. I'll just ask you a question. Do you think or do you agree that you communicate with yourself? As our format, you can share your comments, your views, ask questions on the chat, and we will answer them as we go along. So the importance of communication, like I said before, communication has two sides, just like any other thing, two sides. It depends on the meaning you give to it. It can improve or hinder one's life, one's relationship, just the way people see things. And it has impact on three aspects of our mindsets. For instance, self-esteem, confidence, stress, and well-being. It can either improve on these aspects or destroy them. It depends on the message that we tell ourselves, because we are the receivers, and it's different from talking to other people whereby we get feedback. So we get a neutral feedback or a neutral viewpoint. This time it's so hard because whatever conceptions you have in your head, obviously the receiver will receive just the same message. So it's really hard to have an outside view because you are just one person giving that message and receiving that message. So too, it can either improve or hinder your symptoms of depression, anxiety, and personality disorders, just the same like for self-esteem. So too is for self-harm and suicidal thoughts. Depending on the message again, it might either hinder or improve. Let's say, just going back to the previous sentence, to the previous example, if you say, I can do it no matter what, that is a positive and empowering statement. So you can push yourself to do things that you really like. But then if you give a negative message or a message that is so destructive and makes you feel like you are nothing, that will reinforce the negative feelings. And you are more likely to think of, oh, I'm not worthy enough. There's no point for me. So those negative feelings will come and they'll provoke your thoughts of hurting yourself, harming yourself, or getting into unhealthy habits. So mind those words. It might make you feel in or out of control of your life. Either you use empowering words or disempowering words. All those are down to choice. Though sometimes we feel like we don't even have the choice. We don't understand sometimes that we have choices because from growing up, most of the things that we live or we dwell with now is what we were taught. Because like psychologists tell us that children are like blank slates, as how they describe them. And there's something called imprinting, which is children learn from their immediate environment, which is from their parents, their carers, their community, their families. So all this, our perception is what we learn from our childhood. So what we tell ourselves can either increase pain, increase chronic pain, or heal us from our pain and chronic pain. They can provide an instance for how we interpret it, whether there are obstacles or learning opportunities. So for all these points, there are always two sides of the equation. You have the negative and the positive. Some people say the good and the bad, but whatever way, you have the opposite, because without the opposite, you will not experience the other side of it. Because like it is said, you can only know that there is light when you've experienced darkness. Because if you grow up seeing only light, you won't even know that there's something like darkness. So we'll go to the myths. I don't know what myths you've heard about communicating with yourself, because for me, I know I have heard a lot. So one of it is bully yourself to learn from your mistakes. And working with people, this is really common, that if you do something, they say you need to be hard on yourself. But actually, to an extent, again, both sides, it has positives and negatives. So just be mindful of what you say to yourself. Another myth is getting out of your comfort zone is being abusive. This one, we grow up saying, like our parents, I'll keep going back to our parents because they are our first teachers or carers. Because growing up, some parents, the way they were parented by their parents, and which goes down the line, is just what they know. So again, if you look at what I've said about the light and darkness, if you know just one thing, let's say if you know just darkness, you won't know that anything exists like light. So our parents brought up the best they could because of the knowledge and the experience they had. So they give us things like getting out of your comfort zone is being abusive, because you need to set boundaries for yourself and others around you, and not doing the things that you had been doing. So people will have different interpretations about it. Another myth is there is nothing in between self-criticism and self-love. So, looking at this, there are two extremes as well, but it depends on your perception about it. So without one, you cannot experience the other. So the words that you say to yourself will frame your view of the world, of things going on around you. But in between self-criticism and self-love is self-compassion. But again, there's a myth on self-compassion that when you exercise self-compassion, you are self-pitying or you are self-serving, but it is not. It's just a myth. And the last one is positive toxicity. Because when we talk of thinking positive, it is easily misinterpreted that when you talk positive, you are hiding the negative things, but it's not. You choose to focus on the positive things. Let's say there is an instance, and out of that instance, say 9 things go wrong, and just one goes the right way. Focus on that one thing. It looks very, very small, but focus on it. That will give you reassurance that if just one can be right, then others, you can influence others to be right. So this toxic positivity is not true. It doesn't mean that we hide away from the negative things, especially now in the world. There's a lot of negativity everywhere. You don't even need to go far. Just put on your phone or just go out on the street anywhere, you will see negative things. So just keep asking yourself how challenging situations make you feel and pick the positive aspect of that event or incident. So then how do you improve on your self-communication? The choice of words, like I've said, the choice of words we use represents our inner dialogue first with ourselves. How and what we say to people is a direct reflection of what goes on within us. You hear sometimes people say, oops, it's a slip of the tongue. Well, it's an excuse, but that slip of the tongue, that message, that information, that news that came out, it's not by mistake. It is in that person's mind. They might have been consciously trying to suppress it, but then it comes out in the form of mistake. So again, the words that we feed ourselves is reflected on our communication with other people. So tips on improving self-communication. Be aware of what you are saying to yourself. Again, going back to the previous slide, we talked about self-criticism, bullying. That's not how you correct yourself when you make a mistake. But again, what is a mistake? We'll come to that a bit later. But just be aware of what you are telling yourselves, because we communicate with ourselves 24/7, every day, every night. We are very, very critical to ourselves more than other people. So if you criticize yourself every day, every time, that is imprinting directly onto your mind and to your subconscious mind, and it will stay there, and that is a representation of you. So be aware of what you tell yourself. Explore your beliefs and mindsets. For the beliefs, they come from our childhood, our environment, what we choose to do, what we don't choose to do. But because of social conditioning, there are things we do and we think that We don't even have a choice, probably because they are never questioned or there are not topics that come up in conversations because no one questions. It's just been done. So it needs to be done no matter what. Challenge your thoughts. When you identify these negative thoughts, I say challenge those thoughts. But first, you need to identify the thoughts because if you don't identify, what then will you challenge? You'll just carry on doing what you have been doing. So you need to identify the thoughts first. And that happens by you being inquisitive, at questioning the things you do. Like I say, if you wake up in the morning after your bath or your shower or you are getting dressed in the morning and you want to have that self-awareness, take it slowly and think of what you do. For instance, when you're putting on your, say, your pair of socks, you might start with the left leg and then you go to the right leg. But if you want to become aware, you need to notice which leg you start putting on the socks first. Then you start questioning, why is it that I or you start with the left sock on? And then if you want to change that, the next morning, start with the other leg. So you need to be aware of it first. So challenge your thoughts. And when you identify that thought, you need to stop that thought and change your focus. Like for me, what I say is, when I notice that I'm having some thoughts that I don't really like or I don't want, I say out loud to myself, Nelly, stop. It is a command. I command myself to stop. And because I say it in such a high tone, sometimes it's like I frighten myself and I stop. And it is helpful to me because I change my direction of focus. I stop thinking on that thing because I have identified that it is not helpful because it would drain me of energy. And when I change my focus, I think of something else to do. I'm not running away from that problem. Probably it was not even a problem, it was just a thought that came up. When I distract myself, then I'm able to do something. And if it was a problem that I had been dwelling on and I distract myself, I'll be able to calm down instead of just going on and on that problem. So when I change my focus, I will revisit that problem if it's a problem that I need sorting with a calm mind, and I'll be solution focused and not just going on and on with that problem without a solution. And then replace the thoughts with a neutral or positive one. So there's no point just stopping the thought, because if you stop the thought and you don't replace it, what happens is the old thought comes back. So it needs to be stopped and replaced. So, which is why mostly people start things and they don't go through because, let's say, the common one now is losing weight. People say, oh, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. I will not eat carbs. I will not eat. Okay, let's go for carbs. You say you will not eat carbs. What do you replace the carbs with? Nothing. What happens is you will stay for like a week without having carbs. And then after a week, your body is so weak. And because you did not replace the carb with something else, what happens is you go back to the carbs. And that is why it is not successful. Most people put plans, but they don't go through the plans. Because for the mind, the information we give to the mind takes it as a command, because the mind does not differentiate if it's good for you or if it's bad, if it's right or wrong. Anything you give the mind, it takes it as a command. It's just instruction. It will do it. And since the mind is so creative, whatever message you give to the mind, it will come up with all such inventions and just magnify that problem or that issue. If it's a joyous one, it will be so good. If it's a negative one, it will be so bad. So again, mind those words because it comes down to the words that we use. So then, in summary, the way you, me, we talk to people reflects how we communicate with ourselves. Words are powerful and impactful. Again, it's the two sides. It can be empowering or disempowering. We can disempower ourselves or empower ourselves because the person who makes the decision is us, the individual, regardless of what other people say. It is their opinion, though it is common for people to go with the opinion of other people because they don't really know who they are. And since humans have the desire to be accepted, they go by people's opinion. Practice using words that promote feelings of self-worth and personal power. Some people, most people, don't value themselves. They leave. You see someone, oh, you know what? I am just surviving. No, you don't need to just survive. You need to live life and thrive because God made us in his image in abundance. We deserve that. We can do that. But because we were imprinted by fear, we see everything in the lens of fear. Step out of that. Think positive. Give yourself positive self-talk. Praise yourself. When you do something, no matter how small it is, again, it is you who defines what is small and what is not. But in all, it's an achievement. Even getting out of bed in the morning and getting dressed is an achievement. You need to say, you need to be grateful and praise yourself for whatever you've done. Be grateful and thank God or thank the universe for doing that because not many people in the world can do that thing that you are saying that is small. So praise yourself for whatever thing you do. And like Tony Robbins says, which by the way, I like Tony Robbins. I can watch him every day, anytime. He's got so much power and energy. Anyway, he says, no experience in life has any meaning except the meaning you choose to give to it. So which is why you see an event will happen and each person who observes that event will have a different interpretation of exactly the same event. Why is that? It's down to people's beliefs, mindsets, and experiences. So choose one that supports your growth and development. Thank you so much for watching this, and we will go over to the discussions. And remember to put your questions or comments on the comments. So we'll talk about that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aqua, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Nelly, for that powerful presentation. Right, so today we're looking at what? Communication with oneself. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because communication is at the center of everything that we do. It's at the center of our learning and development. It's at the center of building relationships. It's at the center of thriving in the environment in which we find ourselves. If we do not have this mouth to speak, then we will live in a world where we cannot really explore and discover. So we thank God that He's given us a voice. And we do not only use that voice to talk to other people. Like Nelly said, we use the voice to talk to ourselves. So it starts in and with us. How we speak to ourselves, obviously, will determine how we speak to other people. Right. So Nelly, talking to oneself. I was listening to somebody today called Dr. Shad Hemstetter. And it was all about communication with oneself and how we think and we speak in the language of our thoughts. So it is important that, especially for those who translate, those who speak a different language than the predominant language, or than if you're speaking a second language, we tend to think in our original language and then speak in the second language. So how we think in our original language determines what comes out verbally when we speak. And he was saying that most of the negative thoughts that we have are stored in our right side of the brain. So that comes from, like you said, children are born with a clean slate. There's nothing. He actually said that his best place that he likes to be is in the nursery, where children are born, where you come and stand on this side. Like in America, you stand outside the nursery and you watch the babies. It's like canvas, new canvas. What are these children going to be painted with? So what start going in from the very first communication with your mom, after she sees you, the kisses, oh, beautiful. So that is when it begins, from the very day that you're born. And sometimes in the womb, because babies start hearing from gestation 6 months. So 24 weeks, a baby can hear what's happening outside. So the environment in which they grow determines, that starts from there. It determines how the communication is going to develop. So Nelly, what would you say to somebody who consistently put themselves down? I am not beautiful. I am ugly. I can never make it. Everything in my life is just terrible. What would you say to somebody who speaks to themselves like that?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. That question seems simple, but it is a very, very powerful question, because so many people have that impression. And this is not a quick fix, because I can say, oh, don't feel bad about yourself. You are good. But that one is just to give that person an instant relief that can last a minute or a few minutes, but it's not going to help in any way further than that. So this is where my work comes in. I start to find out how that person came about to think that they are not worthy, or that they are a failure, or whatever they think, and they remind themselves, because it is always something that had happened in their lives that they relive that experience and remind themselves and tell that story over and over to themselves, to the extent that it then becomes their reality. So this one is work that I do, and it goes really, really deep, because sometimes people, because the information is stored in our subconscious mind in the form of our belief systems and mindset, it's not something that we talk about in daily life. So people don't even realize it. But then when, again, it depends if the person is ready, because not everyone is ready to challenge themselves. People easily challenge themselves when the pain gets to a level that they cannot manage anymore and they want to make change. They decide whether to challenge themselves. And the more open a person is to examine themselves, because every situation that a person has gone through in their lives, the information is stored in their subconscious mind. They might not have immediate access because of the limitations of the memory, and not all information is not available in their conscious mind. But to access that, you need to be in a calm state of mind, and then you focus. It's like, I might ask, say, last Christmas, what did you do? Straight away, some people will remember, oh, I prepared turkey in my house, and none of my children ate the turkey because they don't like turkey. Whereas you ask some other person, and they will genuinely not remember because they have so many things going on in their heads. So to access information in your subconscious mind, you need to be in a calm state. There are various ways you can get into a calm state of mind. Some people use meditation. Some people use mindfulness. Some people use yoga, positive intelligence. That just many different things that people practice to get that calm and relaxed state of mind. And when you get to that state, that is the true you, because that is what you are made of. Put aside all the noise, and then you focus. In this life, we don't learn anything about ourselves. We just remember, because we get so distracted that we forget. Okay. But then we remember what is going on. So it seems as if I've not answered your question, but I have actually answered the question, because it is not me giving an answer to anyone. They are the ones answering themselves. I guide them to go to that path where the answers are by talking to them, because they have all the information, they have all the answers within them. I don't have the answers. Even my children here, I don't have the answers. They have the answers themselves. Because even like you have all your answers. No matter the problem that you have, what situation that you've defined as a problem that you are going through, you have answers. But mostly we want approval from other people, and that is where we don't execute the solution to the problem.
Okay, right. That was a long one.
Awesome.
What if I gather well? What you're saying is that people who speak negatively of themselves do so because of an experience that's happened in their life, or people have fed into their subconscious these negative thoughts, and then they just bring it out automatically. Because most of us do things without even thinking or without questioning why we're doing them. We've just become automated, so to speak, and we're just going about our daily activities. So that is the gist of what I'm getting from that answer. All right, okay, great.
Exactly, that is it, yeah.
Well, I have to reflect back to make sure. Right, so something I want to bring up that you mentioned was about the subconscious mind. Now, I love Bob Proctor's teaching. May he rest in peace. And when I first listened to him, I'm like, oh my days, where have I been all these years? I love psychology. I love talking to people. I love understanding what's going on. I love to read people. But when I listened to Bob Proctor, and when he broke down paradigms, it was like, wow. So we have a mind, we have a conscious mind, we have a subconscious mind, we have the body, and we have actions. And our conscious mind is where we think, is where our imagination is where our memories are, is where we have our intuition comes to play, and perception as well. And that is where our will is. And we think with our conscious mind, whereas the unconscious mind is our emotional brain, so to speak. So what goes in the unconscious mind, we cannot accept or reject. We can only accept or reject things in our conscious mind. So what you're saying is, if somebody speaks negatively to us, and in our reasoning mind, in our conscious mind, we take it in and we do not reject that thought, it goes directly to our subconscious. And then it comes out in our emotion, it affects our emotion, obviously, because emotion is what produces action. So it comes out in our emotions, it goes into our emotions, and then we act it out. So somebody keeps telling you, you talk too much, like I've been told. And maybe it affects me. I'm like, I start shutting down. I start shutting down. And when it comes to when I need to speak, I do not speak because I've internalized the fact that I've been told I speak too much. So it affects my actions then. Now I don't speak up in meetings. I don't speak up to defend myself. And that then translates to the results that I get, isn't it? And most often than not, negative results if we have internalized negative things. So it is important that when we're thinking or we're talking to ourselves, we speak the truth to ourselves, we speak positive things to ourselves, and we reject the things that will not build us up. Because we are all work in progress, even if we make mistakes, but it is how we deal with these challenges that matter. So when we talk to ourselves, we have to build each other up. And there's somewhere in the Bible, David in Samuel says that he encouraged himself in the Lord. Sometimes we should not wait for other people to encourage us or to affirm us. We should affirm ourselves and encourage ourselves and step up and have meetings with ourselves, like Joyce Meyer says. Come here. What have you been thinking about? So we can choose our thoughts. So, Nelly, what would you say to a teenager who, like we said, could be very, like you said, toxic positivity? They are very, some teenagers are very outgoing and they believe that they're the top, they're the only ones in the world. What would you say to that teenager who is so cocky and will not listen to advice? Because it is not only negative things that we tell ourselves, we can tell ourselves positive things, but in the wrong way. What would you say to that teenager who is self-assured? Yeah, they have confidence, but then they turn to arrogance. What would you say to that?
Okay, thank you for that. That was a long one.
Of course.
No, it is easy to judge people from the way they present, but mostly people have a mask. And because as humans, we seek approval and acceptance, we put on the public self, which is completely different from the private self. So if I see a teenager who is confident and cocky, like you said, I will not judge them. I will try to find out more, because they might be using their arrogance or confidence as a way of survival, which is a coping strategy from the ego, because the ego is there to help you in situations they find or they think is threatening. But the ego, when the ego someone with an inflated ego might present as being arrogant or too confident, whereas they are covering up their fears. Probably they were bullied, or they had no voice to express themselves growing up in their home. That one reminds me of a book by James Redfield, who talks about control dramas. And there are 4 control dramas, but I'll just end it there. So people develop these control dramas from their experiences. For instance, you might have seen people who are always the victims. It's like, oh, this happens to me. Oh, they just want to talk about their miseries. And it's because that is their coping strategy. They have developed the victim mindset. And in anything, they want to always come out as the victims. You find some whose control drama is the intimidator. So it's easy to see what we see in people's behaviors, but that one is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot that's going on, which, like you've said, in our subconscious mind. And if you think of this, 95% of our consciousness is controlled by our subconscious mind. Think about that, 95%. So if you want to make change in your life, in your conscious life, go directly to your subconscious mind, which is now you have reprogramming your mind. Because when you make those changes in your subconscious mind, it impacts your consciousness straight away. So for this teenager, I'll try to find out a lot more, because they might be using the arrogance or cockiness or being too confident as a strategy. It could be a surviving strategy. So I'll just need to find out. I don't go directly and advise, no, because I don't give advice. People, like I said before, people have answers. Again, it's just for them to identify it and change it, use words that will support their growth. And looking at it, there's a lot of negative influences in the world today that people don't even know who they are. And like, I was really, really surprised by a Forbes report that they said 85% of people globally don't know who they are. So imagine if people keep talking so negative to themselves, how would that help them? Yeah.
Thank you for that, Nelly. You said something that makes a lot of sense. Exploring what the issues are, going underneath the skin, going underneath the surface to find out exactly why people behave the way they do. And it is important that we like you said, not to judge, but we perceive things. And whether we like it or not, we make a judgment call one way or another. We may not do it because sometimes we perceive judgment as negative. Judgment is not always negative. If you see me doing something, you judge that there's something happening there. But it does not mean that you're condemning me for doing that thing. And when you make a judgment that there is something going on underneath, that's when you start exploring. So when we talk about judgment, it's not necessarily a negative thing, because we always perceive things. And when you perceive things, whether you like it or not, you make a judgment call. And that is why when we see a child struggling, we judge what the situation is. Look at the environment. Are they safe? Are they crying because they're wet? Are they hungry? We make a judgment call. So another thing that I wanted to ask, you talked about the myths of self-talk And it was quite interesting because I have not heard some of these ones before. Like bully yourself to learn from your mistakes. That's a new one for me. I never heard that one before. How do you bully yourself to learn
Probably,
from your mistakes?
probably you've heard it in a different way because people say things differently.
Hmm.
So basically, it would be something like, man up. I'm sure you've heard that.
Of course.
But that one is bullying yourself because instead of really being nurturing to yourself, you are like, bam, bam, bam. Just, and sometimes you say, like, just get up and do it. That one could be positive as well as discouraging.
Mm.
But when you talk, that bullying is like you don't even examine what you've done. It's like you don't even take the time to reflect on what you did well, what needed improvement. You just go like, yeah, I could have been first in the class, but I came the third or the second. You know, things like that. Why? It's because all our parents took the first in their classes.
None of them failed. Never. Of course, you were always number one. Whether there was a number two, I do not know.
So it's because we have been taught that failure or making mistakes is bad.
Mm,
But if you don't make mistakes, it shows that you are not learning. So
exactly.
mistakes and failure is just part of the journey.
Hmm.
Because when you fail, it's giving you a learning opportunity to put a lot more effort on that thing rather than that you can't do it. No, it's just to put in. So it's to change that narration of words, the meanings we give to words.
Okay, thank you very much. When you said, it just reminded me this every day now when I come back from work, I ask my kids, "What have you failed at today?" And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, what have you failed at? Because if you have not failed at anything, it means that you have not learned."
Yeah.
And they say,
And
"Oh, we've learned. Oh, we've learned."
just that one. There's one I can't remember the name of this couple, but there are anyway, they are into personal development. I can't remember their names. Third, the lady, I think she's called Sarah. Yeah, she's called Sarah. I can't remember the other name.
Mm,
She said one of the things she learned from her dad
mm.
from a very young age was that every day when she came back from school, her dad will ask, "What did you fail at today?
That's
What did you
exactly who
fail
I
at?
learned it from.
What did you fail at today?" So to them, failure was just like they didn't talk of
Normal.
successes, they talked
Hmm.
of the failures. And she said that was the highest lesson that she gained from her father. Until this day, she praises her father for that because when she does not fail, she feels that she is not putting in enough effort to learn. So
Hmm.
she fails at something. And when she failed at something, her dad would give her like a reward
Hmm.
because her dad would say, "Oh, you put in some effort in that, which is why you failed. So what would you do about that?" So then she was like, anytime she failed, she would put in a lot more effort, and she did not see failure like condemnation or
Hmm.
so she just for her it just became like a game, just became like a game. And I think that is something that we need to be using to change the narration that our children have because we have talked to them that failing is really, really bad, which is not the case. Is to encourage them that when they fail, it's okay. It's just to put a bit more effort or a lot of effort into that thing rather than you were meant
Giving
to
up
come the first in the class and you came out
every
and
time. Right. We could go on and on with these
hmm,
things because it just, self-development just branches everywhere. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking about Robert Kiyosaki and some of the things that he taught about failure and you know, right. Let's come back to our topic, self-talk.
hmm,
Now, I want to talk about you talked about the myth of self-compassion and self-pity and self-compassion, or being self-serving when we look at inward.
Mhm.
What How can you explain the difference between having compassion for yourself and pitying yourself?
Okay. So I'll start with pitying yourself. When you pity yourself, you come from that place of being the victim. Oh, me, this happened to me. Oh, everything goes on wrong with me. You are pitying yourself. You have that victim mentality.
Mm.
Whereas being compassionate is, yes, you have failed. You did not mean to fail. You put in effort. At that time, you thought you put in enough effort, but after sitting the test or whatever, you failed. You realize that, oh, you were meant to put in a lot more. You don't criticize yourself. You don't blame yourself. You take actions that, you know what, I will do a lot more research on that thing because I want to do better at it. So you encourage yourself to do things, but you are not criticizing yourself or bullying yourself or looking at yourself as a victim. No, you are there, you know your worth is still there, but you are feeling compassionate for yourself that yes, you know you can do it. Sometimes you can even look for examples as evidence that yes, you passed or you did well in this, that. You know you can do much better. So that is how you differentiate between self-compassion and self-pity is down to the mindset.
Yes, that's very important because there's nothing I hate more than self-pity and people who play the victim. Oh, it kills me.
It's a lot of energy. Yeah.
It kills me, it drains you. There's nothing like listening to somebody, woe, going, woe is me. Like, I'll bully you into getting over it. Get over it. But no, to be honest, we have to be compassionate to ourselves. We are all a work in progress. We have to, like, you described the difference really well because looking at what we have, the mistakes that we have made, and how we overcome them, and like giving ourselves the permission to fail is important because, like Robert Kiyosaki says, when you're going through school, the emphasis is on being an individual. You cannot do teamwork with your classmate to pass that exam or to write that test. But when you're going out into the work life, you have to do teamwork. And how does that work when you have through all your school life you've been taught to work as an individual? When you go into a business world, they want you to work as a team. So it's like what they call what dissonance. I cannot remember the word, but it's like you're thinking one thing, you want to believe the truth, but the lies are there pulling at you on this other side. So there is conflicting beliefs in your mind. So it's important that we know exactly what the differences are between these words: being compassionate, loving yourself enough to forgive yourself as well, you know, and rather than pouring condemnation on yourself, but loving yourself enough to know that you have value.
Yes.
So you speak to yourself in a positive manner. Speak to yourself in the same way that you speak to a friend, because the way that we speak to ourselves, we do not even we speak to our friends better than we speak to ourselves. But you are with you all the time. So the first relationship you need to cultivate is with yourself. And what you will put into your friend's life, put that same thing into your own life. If you love somebody enough to input positively into their life, imagine that you are your friend. Put that same kind of love in you. You want what's best for your friend, then you should want what's best for you. Be your own friend, is what I would say.
Yeah. I think just to add to that, we turn to be careful the way we talk to our friends because, again, that acceptance and approval.
Mm.
But then ourselves, we just talk to ourselves anyhow, very demeaning. But if you start by being your best friend, like what I say is there's a technique that I learned from Lisa Nichols, and that one, it's it's the mirror exercise.
Mm.
It is very, very powerful. Most people, I'll imagine, use the mirror to put on their makeup and all whatnot. But this exercise is not for makeup.
Mm.
This exercise is to look into your eyes, because as you look into your eyes, you are looking into your soul. Look into your eyes. When you start it feels very strange and
Awkward. Yeah.
uncomfortable. But then you say, whatever. You can start by forgiving yourself. Like for Lisa said for her, she had been carrying a lot of baggages, and it took her 6 months for her to forgive herself completely. Because the way, even myself, when I started, it was really, really hard. And sometimes I'll just stand staring into my eyes and I'll be like, Nelly. Sometimes I just cry and cry and cry. But then as I did it over time, it got to a point where I did not feel that thing holding me. And I was like, oh,
I
it's
love
gone.
you.
So now I can confidently, and this is just a practice that I like. I like just looking into my soul through my eyes. But you need to start somewhere. It is a it looks simple, but it is a very, very powerful practice because most people don't even think that they can look into the eyes, because when you look at your eyes in the mirror, it's like you are staring into some other person's eyes,
Mm.
because you are just a body and your eyes are your soul. So you
Mirror
see
to your
yourself
soul. Yeah.
through your soul. And because you, the physical body, is detached from your soul, that's why you feel that uncomfortableness.
Okay. That is so good. That is so good. Because what you've just said there, what I do is I write on my mirror, I love you. I'm telling myself, I'm writing to
Mm.
me. I love you. When I look in that mirror, I'm telling you, I
Mm.
love you. Because it is important that we know we love ourselves. Not that we become
First.
prideful or self-absorbed. Love ourselves in the sense that God has put value in you.
Mm.
And so you have to value that thing that God sees in you. So you have to value yourself. We are created in his image. And so if he sees value in us, we should see value in ourselves. There is something that you put there when we look and we go away from the myths and we look at the self. Well, almost running out of time.
Mm.
Improving self communication. Some of the
Mhm.
things that you said were to be aware of what we're saying to ourselves. So Jasmaya puts it in this way: think about what you're thinking about, because most of the conversations that we have happens in our brains. We don't obvious all we don't sometimes, not even sometimes, we don't usually speak to ourselves audibly. So the things that we say to ourselves are usually in our minds. And if you think about what you're thinking about, then you stop in your tracks when you start going down the rabbit hole, because our thoughts determine our feelings and and consequently our actions. So if we think negatively, it will affect our feelings and it will affect the way we behave. So if I get up in the morning and I'm feeling and then I just accept the fact that I'm not feeling right today, it will affect my actions. I'll start feeling depressed and I'll start going into my bed and lying there like I did on Monday. But then you get up out of yourself and you're like, what am I thinking about? Get out of yourself. Stop that foolishness. You're worth more than that. These thoughts that you're thinking about, they're not helping you. So stop in your tracks and evaluate what you're thinking about and evaluate what you're saying to yourself. And then you Are they positive or negative? Is it good or is it bad? Is it worth wasting time on? So that reflective attitude.
Yeah.
So some
But
of the things that you said, go on. Yeah.
so yeah, sorry to get in. That one is very, very important because it is, I would say, a skill that people don't even know that they can think of what they are thinking,
Mm,
because people just respond mostly automatic, because people, like when you talk to, or when people listen, or when people are in conversation, they just they just listen. They don't even hear what's being said, or even if they hear it, are just thinking of how they'll respond.
mm,
Again, just to know the difference, that you are talking to yourself. You are the sender and the receiver at the same time. So if you go on with that negative loop, it just goes on and on and on. And like you've said, getting up in the morning, your whole day depends on that one decision that you make in the morning. Let's say you get up from sleep and you are like, oh, today is going to be a bad day. Oh, your mind takes on it and say, you know what? Today is a bad day. Guess what? That day will be a bad day. You might want to get out of bed. You might fall.
mm,
Why? Because the mind will always come up. It is very creative, remember.
mm,
So it will always come up with something that is very bad. You want to make a cup of tea, the tea pours. Just things from one to the next, to the next, to the next, catastrophe happens. It is a decision you made because you told your mind that today is going to be a bad day. And that's why it's been a bad day. But then if you realize that, oh, that mindset, no, I don't want that today, you need to stop. Stop it and say, you know what? I will have a good day.
mhm.
And then push yourself. Don't just say it and sit there. Any decision follows with an action. Push yourself, get up and do it, and take that action. It will be different from when you say, oh, it'll be. So again, those choice of words. You might want to expand your vocabulary. Look into the dictionary for different words that will encourage you, empower you. Yeah.
Thank you, Nelly. We need to really empower ourselves. Sometimes we do not do the right things because we are not aware of what the right thing to do is. So it is important that we should share this information with our friends, our families, with the people we come into contact with, and that is why you're doing what you're doing. You've made this presentation and we're sharing it to the world. So we hope that people will learn from what we have shared. We do not have the monopoly of the information. We do not have all the information. We only share what from the abundance of what we know. And what we know, we have shared with you. We have shared a bit of this and that, and hopefully it has encouraged somebody. Hopefully, we'll think about what we're thinking about. Hopefully, we'll have positive self talk and we will not fall into the midst of bullying ourselves into submission. We should have compassion for ourselves, just like we'll have compassion for other people. And just like we'll communicate with our friend, with our family, and just as we want them to do the best or be the best, we should want the same for ourselves. So do you have any final words before we finish?
Just to say, I mean, you really summed it up really well. So just to say thank you all so much. We don't know who we are impacting. We don't know who we are, who is watching. But we hope that those of you who have watched will take anything and put them into action, because there's no point just to hear. Knowledge is not useful if it's not put into action.
Mm,
But if you've taken anything from here today, is that you don't have to pity yourself. Be compassionate to yourself and reframe the negative words that you tell yourself to empowering and positive words, because you are worthy. You are valuable. You need to value yourself first. And if some other person values you or compliments you, that is a bonus. You need to do you. Oh, yes. Thank you so much. We will be doing this every Thursday. And you can find out more about us on our website, which is hanhancommunitycic.com. I'll say it one more time. hanhancommunitycic.com. Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
We've got our launch of our launch event coming up in the next couple of weeks on the 3rd of December at Hebron Church. We will send out the flyers. Please come join us. Please come encourage us. We also need encouragement. And come and let us tell you how we can work with you, how we can work together to build ourselves up and build our community so that we have a safer community and we empower each other to grow. Thank you for watching and see you next week.
Thank you.